trained, they are even going to be training themselves on how to hold their breath, how to perform breathing in such a way that they are able to run for longer times, and they are able to even run the race without breathing in between. Okay, so let's see what the concept all is behind all that. Okay, we see that these fastest sprinters, when they are running those 100-yard races, did you even know that these are not going to be breathing at all while running that? Then how about the oxygen? What about that? Do they do one thing, or rather, can I ask you, if you want to run from one place to another place and you know that the distance is far, do you first, before running, do you stand at one place and just take in all oxygen as much as you can and fill in the oxygen first and then you go running? You don't do that. Then how do these people do? Have you ever seen an athlete doing that? Before running, they'll stand and take in as much as oxygen as possible. Do you think that that would be actually happening? No, it doesn't. So let's see what actually does happen over there. We know that oxygen would be required at some point or the other. Oxygen would be required. But right now, when they want to run that 100-yard race, what is it that is most important for doing that exercise? It is energy which is important. Okay. So now, we say that they don't breathe at all. Okay, so what do we assume? We might assume that this race was probably run and that too by the energy which was produced in the muscle at that time by breaking down that ATP into ADP. Okay, this is what we would assume. But is this actually taking place? Rather, my question would be, if at all vigorous exercise is done, strenuous exercises being performed by anybody, did you know that the muscles, we are only carrying only that much ATP, which is enough for giving you energy for only barely half a second. Only half a second. Do you know that these strenuous exercise athletes, these are all going to be running for minutes altogether when they're running that 100-yard race? Then how about the energy? Where did that come from? Yes, so now what they have done is, in order to find out that where did all that energy come from, okay, what did they do? They took the blood test of the athlete. But when did they take the blood test of the athlete? They made the athlete do vigorous exercise. For example, they must have asked him, they could either ask him to pedal a bicycle very quickly, the ones you get in the exercise rooms, or they can ask him to run on a treadmill, where as he is running forward, the belt of the treadmill would run according to his speed, it would be running backwards. Okay, so while performing this exercise, his blood test was taken at various steps. Alright, now what is it that this blood test showed? In his blood, there were varying levels of lactic acid which were found. Alright, which means that during these strenuous exercises, lactic acid is being produced in the body. Okay, so now let's see over here, they have displayed a graph, okay, of lactic acid, and this graph shows the different amount of lactic acid which is found in the muscles during that strenuous exercise, and also how that lactic acid levels are even after the exercise has stopped. Alright, so now when we see this graph over here, first of all, we have asked that athlete to perform the treadmill exercise or the bicycle exercise for, let's say, around 9 minutes continuously. Alright, so this what we are seeing here. From 0 to 9, this is the time. Alright, so x-axis is going to be indicating the time in minutes. Then what is our y-axis showing? Y-axis is showing the amount of lactic acid which is accumulated in the blood. And what is the unit of that? Unit would be in the blood, that is milligrams per cubic centimeters. Alright, so now we have our graph over here which is indicated to us how much exercise has been performed for how many minutes, and we're also having a graph which is showing how much lactic acid has been accumulated in the blood at different minutes during the exercise also, and after the exercise also, what has happened to the lactic acid quantity. So now, seeing this graph, let's answer some questions which were there. Alright, what was the concentration of lactic acid in the blood to start with? Well, when the person started his exercise, the amount of lactic acid in the blood was only 20 milligrams per cubic centimeter. Then what was the greatest concentration reached during this whole experiment? Now in these pointers that you are seeing here, A, B, C and D, these are all the different times at which the blood test was taken during this experiment. Alright, so here they are indicating at different levels at which the lactic acid amount was present in the blood. So what was the greatest concentration reached? That was at B over here, just above 100 milligrams per cubic centimeters of lactic acid. Then what happened? After he stopped the exercise, it reached to the highest peak, and then can you see that after the exercise was stopped, it slowly the level of lactic acid has started to decline, right? Now the question is, why would it decline? How is it, and what is it that is going to be removing that lactic acid? Well, that would be none other than oxygen. Oxygen is what would come into the picture, into the blood, and that is what is going to be able to remove that lactic acid from there. So when we see the next one, how long might it take for the original lactic acid level to be reached again? Now how will we get that? What was the original lactic acid level to begin with? It was 20 milligrams per cubic centimeter. Now when this exercise was conducted, we stopped conducting at this here at point D, the blood test. Okay, how much is it at point D? It is 40. When we began, it was only 20. So in order for it to come back to 20, if at D it was around 60 minutes, nearly 60 minutes, then naturally it would take a little longer to reach to the beginning point as we started off with. So you may say it will take just above 10 or 20 minutes, above an hour, in order for the lactic acid to be back to where we began with. Okay, I hope this chart was clear to you, where it's indicating what is on the x-axis. It was time, and that too in minutes. Okay, and on the y-axis it was lactic acid. Okay, and what was the unit? It was milligrams per cubic centimeters. All right. Okay, now let's continue. When we talk about lactic acid, well, whenever you're running, okay, immediately you might, after a little while rather, you might feel a lot of pain, okay, and it's not that those athletes don't feel pain, they feel the pain too. So all this pain is due to the accumulation of lactic acid at the level of those muscles, okay. So this accumulation of lactic acid that happens, but also understand, it is not only resulting in pain, but lactic acid accumulation is the reason why you feel tired, is the reason why you feel fatigued after you run for a long time. After running for a long time, don't you feel like standing and panting? What is panting? Just standing and taking a breath for oxygen to come inside the body. That is panting. And when you see these athletes running also, while the race is on, nobody will just stand still in the middle of the race, take a pause and start panting. Will they? They never do that. So what happens is, while they're running, they're not breathing. What are they doing? They're just saving it. And once the race is over, that is when you will find them panting. Okay. So what we see here is, at this time, while running, the lactic acid was produced actively by the muscles, and after the exercise, when this blood test was taken, it was gradually removed. Who is it that would have been removing it? It would have been oxygen. So basically, sugar in the muscles was converted to lactic acid, and energy stored in the lactic acid molecules, okay, read this sentence again. The energy stored in the lactic acid molecules is actually less than that of the energy stored in the sugar molecules. So we see that if at all that acid is coming from the sugar, then the energy released could be used to again form ATP from ADP and phosphate, okay, or IP, inorganic phosphate or phosphate. All right. So now we come to the next question, where I told you that, do we begin any exercise by first breathing very heavily? Do we do that? Do we begin by first breathe for 5 minutes, store up all the oxygen and then start running? We don't do that. What do? We first use the energy, right? Why would oxygen be required? For energy. What do we do while running? We first use the energy. then we need the oxygen. So isn't it like you're taking loan or you're taking a debt, okay, for oxygen, okay? Why? Because you need that energy. So first you're utilizing the energy and then you're going to bring back the oxygen, alright. This is a condition which is called as oxygen debt, alright. In general conditions, you don't need an oxygen debt. Oxygen debts are being done by the body only when you are performing vigorous exercise, where energy is being utilized first and then oxygen is going to be restored in the body. So basically we see here that muscles are going to be using that energy during the anaerobic breakdown of glucose. That is why when I'm saying I'm using this word oxygen depth for when we're doing strenuous exercise, when we're doing exercise which is going to be going on for a long time, and all that time you're not breathing enough to get all that oxygen in. So that would be in the anaerobic muscles, okay, anaerobic respiration. It is not until afterwards that the athlete obtains that oxygen which is required. So after running that 100-yard race, then after the race is finished, that is when he will start panting in order to get that oxygen back inside the body. Now once that oxygen enters back in the body, what will that oxygen do? Immediately it is going to help to remove that lactic acid, okay. So while removing that lactic acid, that is what will also reduce the pain which is caused over there, and also it will help in improving his fatigueness. Naturally, after running so long without taking a breath, the person would definitely feel fatigued. What do I mean by the word fatigued? It means tiredness, generalized weakness, be feeling drenched out, okay. So this whole thing, when we undertake strenuous exercise, okay, remember strenuous exercise, we build up something which is called as a oxygen debt, and that oxygen debt has to be repaid later. So we're going to be, the main reason for us to breathe oxygen is to get energy, but since we're using up the energy first, we're going to be requiring to replace the oxygen later on, and that's what's called as an oxygen debt, alright. Okay, now let's come to another topic. What does this food look like? Isn't it the famous dhokla? Okay, now why am I putting this on the screen right now? Tell me, how is this prepared? This is prepared by using your besan, okay, that is gram flour, and you're going to be adding what? This is the very important part here. We're going to be adding buttermilk. Why buttermilk? What is in buttermilk? Buttermilk contains lactobacilli. So it is that lactobacilli which is going to work there, and that is why whenever you see these dhokla, you see the spongy appearance of it. The spongy appearance comes because we call it as a spongy appearance because there are small pores and openings inside there. What exactly are those pores and those openings? Yes, those are all carbon dioxide which are trapped over there. And the whole process that has happened here is called as fermentation. Sometimes these dhokla or foods like idli, whichever are fermented, give off a slight tingent or a slight strong flavor to them, and that too it's because of something which is produced during this process. So let's see what is fermentation all about. Fermentation is the chemical change brought about in an organic substrate due to the activity of microbes, okay, or either it could be due to microbes like I told you, the lactobacilli, or even enzymes coming from those microbes. They all, either the microbe itself or the enzyme would be working for fermentation. Now what is it that happens in fermentation? The sugar molecule which is present, remember we added buttermilk to the gram flour. So the sugar molecule which is present is going to be converted to alcohol. Which alcohol? It's ethanol, and that's what is giving it a slight strong taste to it, okay. Sometimes alcohol, then carbon dioxide is going to be released too, and it is this carbon dioxide released during fermentation which is going to help to make it fluffy, because the carbon dioxide are small molecules of gas which is filled inside, and that's what makes it porous, alright. So carbon dioxide is there and energy is going to be released too. This is basically what the equation of fermentation is, alright. Now Coming next, when we talk about so much of respiration, when we've spoken about the human respiration, we started the whole chapter with a respiration in different animals, if you remember those, okay. We read in frogs, we saw that frogs have got two types of respiration because they are found in land and in water. Do you remember that? On land, the frogs mode of respiration, weren't they by the pair of lungs? And in water, mode of respiration were gills, right? Water were by diffusion, by the skin, cutaneous respiration. What about fishes? Fishes, we know that they are breathing through gills, but if you remember, to maximize that energy or that oxygen transfer, there was a mechanism happening inside the gills and inside the capillaries. Those we called it as a counter current mechanism, correct? What about arthropods? Do you remember in arthropods, I gave you a name which was called as spiracles. Yes, on the insect's body, there are small respiratory openings through which oxygen can enter in. Those are known as spiracles. Alright, so that way we saw so many animals and we saw the respiration and breathing organs which are there in them. Okay, so now let's come to our plants. Now, we all know that plants have got different openings or small openings present on them at different areas throughout the whole plant. Okay, and we know that we call these openings as the stomata. Alright, so now when we're talking about these stomata are the apparatus, or rather this is the location where the gaseous exchange in the plant is going to be taking place. Alright, now we see here it is the stomata can be present at the roots at different levels, okay, at the roots, at the lenticels, at the stems, it could be present at different areas. Now when we see over here in the plant, okay, as you can see these openings that you are seeing, this is where the stomata would be. Can you see that stomata is leading to small air spaces, okay. Now depending on different locations on the plant, those air spaces could be different, either bigger or smaller, but basically what's happening here is this is helping to form a whole network inside which is going to help to store that air or the oxygen which would be required, okay. This forms, so as I said, this is forming a continuous network throughout the whole plant, and these air spaces, as I told you, they would be larger in certain places like the leaves and smaller in other places can be seen like other parts of the plant, okay. So air spaces also can be of different sizes in the plant. These air spaces, now what do we see here? All of these air spaces, they are lined, okay. Internally they have a lining of what? With water. What happens here? In this lining, oxygen will be dissolved inside there. Now when oxygen is dissolved inside there, what happens is that oxygen is going to pass through the cell walls and then ultimately enter into the cytoplasm of the cells over there. Alright, so how is all this happening? This is basically, all of this is going to be happening by diffusion. And what happens over there? Once oxygen enters in, then the sugar is going to be converted to carbon dioxide. Sugar along with the oxygen, okay, is going to be converted to carbon dioxide, water, and naturally energy is going to be released. That is what we call as respiration, okay. So even they require oxygen over there, and how is that reaching? Through the stomata, and oxygen is going to be dissolved here and enter into the water over there. Alright, okay, so all of this, as I just told you, it is being done by the process of diffusion. Alright, now other parts of the plants, let's talk about the root areas. Alright, when we talk about the root areas, how exactly are the roots being maintained to be in constant contact with air? Or rather, I can call it as, how is aeration of roots being done by this very plant? Okay, so how is this done? You know that at different areas at the roots, okay, there are different structures which are going to be allowing to take in oxygen. So we see here that there are lenticels present, okay. Even these root hairs, alright, they are so thin that they are able to hold on to that air over there. So lenticels are present, structures like root hairs are present. What do? They are going to be able to, under normal circumstances, in normal ground areas, these structures are the ones which are going to be able to take in that air which is present in the spaces of the soil. Alright, so oxygen is obtained by the air spaces which would naturally be present in the soil in that area. So because of the air spaces in the soil, the roots in those areas would be maintained aerated. Okay, even the roots require air too, naturally. But now my question is, what about those plants which are found in an area where there is maximum amount of water where the roots are? What if they are in that kind of soil which is buried in water all the time? I am talking about plants which are found in near ponds, near lakes, in marshy areas. What about these plants and what about their roots? The roots are inside soil which is constantly wet, and could be that soil may be all clustered together. So do you think that in this area, would that soil have enough air spaces? Definitely it would not have those air spaces. So that's why when we see plants in these marshy areas, they have certain modifications found within them which is going to be helping them also remain aerated. So let's see what those are. Whenever you go to a marshy area or a pond or a lake, if at all you happen to see any plants over there, you might want to pluck one and check out the stem of it. Okay, when you see the stem of that area, of that plant, you will basically see that these are going to be having hollow stems. Okay, the stems are going to remain hollow in order to store air in them. Either the stems will be found hollow, or you may also see other modifications like what we find in mangroves. What is it in this mangroves that's happening? Can you see how these roots have come up? Okay, and these are called as aerial roots. Okay, these aerial roots are going to be allowing the air to enter into that root system so that they are not deprived of air in that region. Okay, so these are different modifications which are found in plants which are in the marshy areas or in the areas which are filled with water. What happens in those areas? The soil does not contain enough air. Alright, now ahead we also see some different structures over there. Okay, in those areas we also see structures like, let's say in a plant like an orchid. Okay, these orchid plants, they have tissues which are there, and those tissues over there are going to be helping in producing oxygen. Okay, even that oxygen is required by the plants to produce the energy. Okay, and naturally, since energy is produced, carbon dioxide is going to be released in that area. Alright, now let's come to a very important topic, which is the differentiation between photosynthesis and respiration. Now, first and foremost point, we know that photosynthesis is done only by plants. What about respiration? Respiration is going to be done by both. So now let's see, when we talk about photosynthesis, let's see the differentiations between them. It produces sugar from light energy. This is the production of sugar. Photosynthesis. So by using light, we are synthesizing something. Alright. So that is producing sugar. What is happening in respiration? Whatever sugar has been produced, that sugar is going to be burnt down, or you can say used up. Why is that being used up? Because we require energy. Alright. Second point. This is going to be storing energy, whereas respiration is going to be releasing energy. Because of the process of respiration, energy is released and we are able to perform not only our daily activities that we want to do, but even internally whatever our body activities are required, that is also coming from this energy released here. Coming to the third point, photosynthesis occurs only in the cells which have got chloroplast. Remember, this chloroplast is required for photosynthesis to occur. Alright, because the light reaction, the dark reaction, all of that is happening inside the grana and stroma of the chloroplast. Remember our last chapter together. And in respiration, this is going to be happening in most of the cells, be it a plant cell, be it an animal cell, whether the cell has got chlorophyll or does not have chloroplast, it does not matter. Respiration will occur. Alright. This is going to, photosynthesis releases oxygen, whereas this is the opposite. Respiration is going to be utilizing up oxygen. And photosynthesis uses up water, whereas respiration is going to be actually producing water. Remember, released in the form of water vapors. Then, this is photosynthesis will be using up carbon dioxide, whereas the respiration process is the one which is going to be producing carbon dioxide. Okay. And the last point, Photosynthesis requires light, whereas the respiration process can occur both in dark as well as in light. Alright, so today's lecture we spoke all about the anaerobic respiration. We spoke about what happens during exercise and during the sports people when they are working out. Alright, now let's come up and let's just see some exercise questions which are given in our textbooks. Alright, so we've solved these basic exercise questions today, and in tomorrow's lecture we will be solving some extra questions which are important for your foundation basics and also for entrance exams which will be coming up. Alright, so we see here, fill in the blanks. Exhaled air contains. What does exhaled air contain? Exhaled air would contain carbon dioxide and water. Okay, in the water vapor. Flap-like muscular valve which controls movement of air and food. A flap-like muscular valve controlling movement of air and food. This is a valve which is present, which is above the opening of the respiratory tract. It makes sure that no food enters into the respiratory tract, because if at all food by mistakenly also enters into the respiratory tract, this could result in severe choking. So that flap which is present is called as the epiglottis. Remember this. Okay. Alright. Energy currency of the cell. This is very easy. Energy currency of the cell would be called as ATP. Okay. Lenticels are respiratory organs and they exist in which part? Remember, lenticels, I told you, along with root hairs. These are the structures which can store in air over there. So, it exists in the roots. Okay, mangrove trees respire with their mangrove trees. Remember when I said mangrove trees, they had roots which were coming above the soil upwards. Okay, and because they are coming upwards, we call these as aerial roots. Okay, we call those as aerial roots. Alright, now let's see the other questions which are present in our textbook. Alright, we will find vocal cords in. Now, what were these vocal cords? The vocal cords were those structures due to which sound was produced. There were two cords. If you remember, the cords remain closed whenever you want to speak, and the cords would remain open whenever you want to breathe. So because the opening and closing perform different activities, that is why you are not able to breathe and talk at the same time. Ever notice that? So when we talk about vocal cords, which part of the respiratory system are they present in? Well, they are found in the sound box, the voice box, and we call that as the larynx. Now tell me, what is the structure that was present at the level of the pharynx? If you remember, it was a lymphoid tissue, a tissue which prevents the germs entering into the body, and that lymphoid tissue was known as tonsils. Okay, alright. Now, a cluster of air sacs in the lungs are called as, remember those terminal parts. Before we go into those terminal parts, let's just remember, or let's just revise the whole bronchial tree. Do you remember that bronchial tree? It all started with the trachea. Okay, bronchial tree started with the trachea. After the trachea divided into the primary bronchi. It is at the level from the primary bronchi itself that it is going to be entering into the lungs. After the primary bronchi comes the secondary bronchi. Alright. After that came the tertiary bronchi. Alright. Now after the tertiary bronchi, next came the thinner versions which were known as the terminal bronchioles. Alright. After that came the respiratory bronchioles. Alright. And finally, this was alveolar. Alright. Finally, we had the alveolar sacs. which were ultimately forming alveoli, which ultimately were made up of small alveoli. Okay, now if you remember in this whole bronchial tree, just a small revision that there were two basic parts to this whole tree, and right, ranging from the trachea till all the way up till the terminal bronchioles. This is the part of the tree which was known as the conducting part. Okay, because over here air was just being conducted from up to down, whereas when we talk about the remaining part over here, this part over here, this is the part which was known as the respiratory part, or you may call it as the exchange part. Okay, why is that? This is the region where gaseous exchange is actually going to be taking place. Alright, this was just a quick revision since we had done human respiration quite some lectures back. Now coming back to our question, a cluster of air sacs in the lungs are called as, in the lungs they were called as the alveolus. Alright, okay, alright. Next, which of the following is correct? Now this is about breathing. Remember, in mechanism of respiration we initially started with breathing, where breathing dealt with inspiration and expiration. Now my next question, you might be knowing what I'm gonna be coming up with. There are 4 structures in our body which are responsible for the breathing process to take place. Do you remember which those 4 structures were? It started with the muscles which were called as the intercostal muscles. Alright, what was the second thing responsible? Wasn't it ribs? After ribs, third responsible was the sternum, and the fourth apparatus responsible was the diaphragm. What exactly was the diaphragm? Diaphragm was a muscle, and during relaxation, normally this diaphragm is a muscle which is normally dome shaped. Alright, now if I have a dome shaped organ and if I am going to contract that, what would be the shape of it? It will become flat, won't it? So we see here, let's say here, over here, what of the following are correct, they are asking us. Okay, let's just start with the first option only. The diaphragm contracts. Now when this diaphragm will contract, what will happen in the thoracic cavity? Diaphragm is dome shaped, diaphragm has contracted, so diaphragm became flat. So when it became flat, what happened to the size of the thoracic cavity? Didn't the volume increase? Yes or no? So the diaphragm contracts, resulting in volume of chest cavity increase. Our first option only is the correct option. The diaphragm contracts, volume of chest cavity decreased is wrong. Diaphragm expands, okay, volume of chest cavity increase would be wrong, and diaphragm expands, volume of chest cavity decrease. When we say, okay, now when I say contracts and expands, okay, so when it is contracting, what's happening to the diaphragm? It's becoming flat. When it is relaxing, they can say here expanding. When it expands, what is happening to the diaphragm? Again, it would become dome shape. When it becomes dome shape, what will happen to the chest cavity? Won't it become reduced? Okay. Next, respiration is a catabolic process. Now, when I want to, I'd like you to understand what exactly is the meaning of something being catabolic. Okay. Now, first of all, have you heard of the word metabolism? You must have heard of the word metabolism. But what exactly is metabolism? When we talk about metabolism, it is broken down into 2 parts, okay? And that first part is called as the anabolism. And the second part is called as catabolism. Okay, so basically anabolism is a process where there's going to be building up of things put together and making a complex, which means that there's going to be simple molecules coming together to form complex, whereas Catabolism is a process where those complex molecules have to be broken down to form simpler ones. So when I'm talking about the word kata always means breakdown. Alright. So coming here, respiration is a catabolic process because of. So why is it called as a catabolic process? There has to be somewhere something breaking down. So let's see our options here. Breakdown of complex food molecules. Yes, synthesis of chemical energy, conversion of light energy, or energy storage. Well, why is it catabolic? Because what's happening is there's going to be breakdown of those food molecules. Alright. Now, energy is stored in, where is energy stored? It is stored in the mitochondria. Now, children, in our next lecture, what we will be doing is we'll be discussing certain MCQs which will be asked in your NEET, or rather we can say for your foundation. Alright, so help you prepare yourself for further examinations, which we have done from this chapter itself. You will see that we have covered so many points from your the foundation syllabus, which will become easier for you to link it with your current syllabus right now. Okay, so till tomorrow's lecture, stay home, take care and be safe. Bye-bye.